Hello, Brave family. I am Jennifer Marshall. I'm the executive director of This Is My Brave, and welcome to our finale episode of our pilot season of BraveTV. Tonight's episode, we are talking about finding humor in the journey. So, to remind you guys, the main concept of BraveTV is to bring stories of hope into the homes of our audience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Each week, we will cover different topics that our own Brave alumni can share their expertise on. This gives our alumni an opportunity to share their stories on another platform, talk about their journey with This Is My Brave, and offer support and resources to viewers who may be having similar struggles, especially during such a high-stress time. So again, this week's theme is finding humor in the journey. We have three of our alumni, Amy T., Raj Suresh, and Kendra Cox, who each incorporated humor into their This Is My Brave performances. Is it okay to laugh about mental health? Are there boundaries we need to be aware of? We're diving in to talk about the bonding and the normalization that comes from laughing our way through difficult times. We have clips of each of our guests' performances. So we'll kick it off tonight with Amy T. This is a piece of her Boston 2017 Brave performance.
I heard the words mental illness was probably about 10 years ago. I was dating 4 women, not at the same time. Well, some of them overlapped, but they were all in the mental health related field or therapists. And in fact, my last girlfriend was a therapist, and when we would get into a fight, halfway through the argument, she would be like, "That's all the time we have for today." When is it my turn? But the media will give you an image of what mental illness looks, right? It's usually like someone with orange hair that blew up a movie theater or a school. And then after they cover such a tragedy, they'll say, this person suffers from mental illness, and then they just cut to the weather. So that's the image that you're left with. But the reality is that 1 in 4 people are diagnosed with mental illness every single year. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but every single one of us in here has a diagnosable characteristic of mental illness. So it's more like 1 in 4 don't have mental illness, just somebody hasn't told you yet. Like, come on, we all have a little something, right? We do, right? Because I keep my ex-girlfriends in my phone under their prescription. Celexa, Paxil. I haven't picked up the phone in years when Lexapro calls. I can tell you that much right now. And I don't think the fact that my wife is a psych nurse is a coincidence either. How awesome is that? I married a psych nurse. It's like in-home care without the copay. It's fantastic.
So that was Amy. We are so happy to have her with us today. Amy, so good to see you.
It's nice to see you, Jen. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I loved flashing back to 2017, your performance. So can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Amy T. I'm a Boston-based comedian that performed in the 2017 Boston show of This Is My Brave. I live in a little town, very happily married with my wife, about 45 minutes north of Boston in Haverhill.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit more about your comedy. Just give us a little more. I mean, you run experimental.
So I started performing comedy a little over about 15, 16 years ago now. And I knew the first time like that I stepped on stage that a spark inside me, right? Like my soul lit on fire. Like this is what I knew I had a passion for. I knew this is what I was supposed to do. But, and then after I gained quite a bit of success early on. I was touring the country. I did a documentary and made a movie, and I got a lot of success. But at the same time, that is when my mental illness started showing its rear ugly head, and my substance abuse became out of control. You're in nightclubs and bars 4 or 5 nights a week. I think that's what you're supposed to do. It was part of the job. So I was drinking way too much and partying way too hard, and I crashed and burned, and wanted to. It was April 17th, 2010, and I hit my rock bottom. Wanted to take my own life, and then I sought help and was finally diagnosed with bipolar disorder and social anxiety, dual diagnosis with the substance abuse. And then um, once I got the diagnosis, I just turned and decided to embrace it and run with it, and started writing comedy about it. And so that's kind of how experimental comedy kind of came out, or experimental comedy therapy, or ECT, on purpose, right? Because everybody should have a little shock humor in their life, and it's kind of taken off from there in the last 10 years.
It's amazing. I feel like we all need to laugh about, I mean, gosh, I have so many funny moments from my periods of mania. I feel like it's nice when you can really just laugh about it sometimes, right? I mean, it's what
it's what kept me moving forward, right? Being able to use, and then also like being able to use the stage as a platform of busting stigma. Right? Like you played the clip of like the media gives you an image. Well, that's not what it looks like.
Nope, it looks like me and you.
Yeah, I'm at the grocery store, I'm at the bank with you, like your sister, your best friend, whatever.
Exactly.
So it is a backhanded way of giving an education to the audience when you're making them laugh,
Yes, for sure. Amy, tell us about how you heard about This Is My Brave and what made you want to come out. I mean, it was a natural fit for you, but how did you hear about it?
My friend Eliza Williamson did Boston show prior to that, and she was telling me about it. And of course, I saw it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is awesome!" She's like, "You have to audition." She's like, "You'd be perfect." And I was like, I actually was very intimidated to audition and perform, because sometimes I don't know, I was, but it worked out anyways.
You were perfect. I mean, such great laughs during that show. You heard the audience roar. It was great.
It was pretty magical that night. I got to say that's a top 5 for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, the only other thing I have to ask, which I think it just lends to, how you really got into this after recovery, but do you think that participating in This Is My Brave has aided in your recovery? I mean, being a part of a community?
Yeah, what's funny is as you get older, it's hard to make friends, right? It's like, and I really, and then because of like being a part of the community, I've made friends, and like good friends, and solid in good core foundation friends that, it's been amazing. And then I think as you know, that when you did the Boston College tour, I helped somebody, work with his performance. So that was kind of like, that was kind of cool to me too, so it's been great all the way around the last 3 years.
Awesome.
And then you call me when I was getting a pedicure to tell me you want me to do the Washington show. So the All-Star show.
We are going to get that going. That's going to be next year. The pandemic threw us off, but yes, we are going to get you back up on our stage next year, because we got to get more laughs going. So I love that.
Thank you.
Awesome, Amy. Well, thanks for the intro. I'm going to have Katie, our backstage director, move you backstage. We're going to bring in a clip from our next guest. Raj Suresh was one of our storytellers in our Bentonville, Arkansas show in 2018. So we're going to play a clip from that performance for you.
It's a funny thing, right? Like once you graduate college or whatever, you discover that you have anxiety, depression, you don't know how to deal with it, you don't have friends around you, and like some people resort to like drinking heavily. Some people need to like exercise obsessively. Some people, for me, It wasn't until I started doing comedy that I realized like that was my thing. Like most comedians, for whatever reason, find depression to be very common in our circles. And I think it's because we look in negative places all the time for jokes. We hunt in dark places. And pretty soon you end up living there and you just don't recognize it. And it's a weird thing to do to yourself because like when you have depression and anxiety, they work in tandem. They're like best friends. Your depression would be like, man, you don't want to get out of bed. And then you don't get out of bed. And then your boss calls and they're like, where are you? And then you're really anxious because you haven't gotten out of bed. And then you don't get stuff done, so people get mad at you. Now you're depressed again, so you don't want to go into work. It's just a never-ending circle. When I started doing comedy, it was the first time in my life I realized, like, I actually give a shit about this. Not that I don't give a shit about other stuff, but I just found it weird that I had like a well-paying job and I did well at it and I was good at it, but then there was this thing that paid like $8 every like 15 days and I wanted to do that more. So a couple years after that, I did the comedy thing and there was a moment where I decided like I need to see a therapist, and I literally Googled therapist and I called the first number and I went for my first session. It took me 6 years to get to the point where I actually called a therapist, and 6 weeks to undo so many of the underlying things that anxiety brings with it. It was crazy. I saw my most productive year in the year following that, right? So for about 18 months I did comedy. About 2 years in I opened for Creed, and then the following year after that, everything just seemed to happen because I was no longer worrying about things I couldn't control. I was focusing on the things that I wanted to do with comedy. In that year, I managed to open for like a bevy, like 20 people that have been on Comedy Central, tour a little bit, put out an album in a year and a half. That album went to #2 on the iTunes charts. I did it all out of here in Bentonville, Arkansas. And that should scare you guys because stand-up doesn't even pay and Indian people still want those jobs. We're coming for everything. And I don't think like a lot of people will say like people with anxiety or depression, it's hard like because you have people in your life and they go, well, you seem like you've got it together. Right, but only just because I'm very good at hiding my feelings. It's the hardest thing to recognize. A lot of people in your life won't even tell you that it's happening to them just because America, and a lot of countries, but America is probably the one society I've seen where people are in a mind state where we put the onus on the person going through the problem to fix it. It just goes, how do we help you get over what you've got going on in your life? The real question should be, how is 1/3 of this country going through this? Is our environment a little bit sick? Have we not looked around? If 1/3 of America had broken legs, we'd be going, are we making curbs too high? What do we need to do to fix this? But because it's in your head, it's easy for other people to just go, I don't know. And the brain is a complex thing. We don't spend enough time understanding it because you can't fix it with a cast. It's difficult. You got to do stuff like this. And you got to get people talking.
That was Raj, and he'll be joining in just a second. Raj, so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for being here. Hey, give us an intro. Give us your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Raj. I'm from India, and I moved to Bentonville where I started doing comedy it must have been about 7 or 8 years ago now, but I've been in the United States for about 12. So lived in a couple places, 5 or 6 different cities in the US already, and Bentonville was the one where I spent the majority of my time. And it's where I started doing comedy as a result of, one beer too many after a tennis match and stumbling into an open mic. So that's the story.
Love it. It's so real, like how you deliver, you tell your backstory, but you're able to really just make it so relatable, which I loved. So tell us about how you found This Is My Brave.
I'd seen a lot of This Is My Brave stuff on the internet, and I'd seen, friends of mine do it, and I got really interested in figuring out what it was. And so I think I was the one that reached out, if memory serves me correctly, and I just asked if you guys would be interested in having me on the show. That was that.
And you made history. I love it. What do you think the This Is My Brave experience has meant for you for your recovery? Like, has it has it influenced things?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just um, I think stage performances ask you to crystallize your experiences in some ways. So a lot of stuff that had just been floating around in my head for a long period of time, I suddenly had to find a way to compact it down to whatever 5 or 10 minutes. I forget how long I spoke, but I really just for the first time had to actually think through what all the steps were from beginning to end of my time in America, when my depression sort of kicked in, when I had anxious thoughts, what that looks like, and then what like a path or a road to recovery actually involved for me. And then more so than I think what it did for me mentally, I think it was just nice to be able to share that and feel like I wasn't the only person going through it. And it was very interesting when we did the show. You know, there were people on the show as young as 12, and then you had people a lot older. So there you had a very wide spectrum of people going through very similar experiences.
Yeah, it really connects us. I mean, the storytelling aspect of what we do, and yeah, we're more similar than we are different, right?
Sure, yeah.
So tell me, like, where are you today? How's your comedy going these days?
Well, I moved to New York City on the 1st of March, so
Oh my God.
comedy is all about timing, and I don't think mine was very good with regards to relocation. Um, Nonetheless, it's been good because I've invested in other avenues of comedy that I've traditionally ignored. Right, like you build out a fairly robust plan for how you're now going to write. We don't know when live comedy is going to come back in the same way that it existed in the world that we used to know.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I live in New York. I live right here in Hell's Kitchen, which
Mhm.
is it's like right in the center of the city. Um, yeah, so comedy is going, but in very different avenues, right? So I'm slowly getting myself together to put a podcast out into the world because, as we all know, the one thing that the entertainment industry is clamoring for is yet another comedian's podcast about mostly nothing.
Podcasts are great, though. Everyone wants a good podcast, so that is awesome that you're pursuing that. How
Yeah.
has it been?
Well, hopefully
Just
they'll be happy with like a medium podcast because that's what I'm coming up with.
that's awesome, though. What I mean, it's not easy. Believe me, I actually just I'm at the beach visiting my family this week, and was on the beach with my son, and just kind of impromptu grabbed a microphone and recorded a little episode about mental health and kids with him. And now I'm looking at this, audio 22-minute audio file of like, how am I going to clip it together? It's I admire people who can put a podcast together and put it out into the world. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, how has it been in New York City? Like, I mean, God, you've been in the epicenter.
Yeah, so I actually spent a little bit of time on the road when things really got bad. I headed out to just spend some time with family and friends and get out of the city. But I've been back now for a couple weeks. Every single day, I tend to walk a ton. So since being back in New York, it's been, I don't know, I cover roughly 50 to 60 miles a week on foot.
Wow.
Just just sort of getting out of the house, breaking up the day, not being in the apartment. Every day there's more people for sure on the streets. This has been since Monday phase 2 openings began. I've seen people, if I went downstairs now, there's a restaurant outside and there's people that are sitting at tables, you know, full parties of 4 or 6 or 8, having meals and no masks and stuff. But I'm not gonna lie, as worrisome as it is with regard to transmission of COVID, it's nice to see people finally getting to reconnect, and hopefully those are the people that have been quarantining together in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to see things starting to resume normalcy. Well, good. Rod, we're
Right.
so glad you're here. So thank you for your intro. We're going to get back together in a little bit. We're going to meet Kendra next. So Katie's going to move you backstage. We're going to see a clip from Kendra Cox, who was in our Columbus, Ohio show. That was Kendra. She'll be joining in just a second. Kendra, so good to see you.
Hi, Jen.
So we should have set that clip up a little bit better too. I should have had you set it up. But we are going to be sharing the link where folks can go and see your full performance to really understand the story, because you told it so well that day about, I mean, let's do your intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's go into a little more backstory on the clip that people just saw.
Yeah, so my name is Kendra Cox. I am from Columbus, Ohio. I was in the Columbus show of November 2019. During the day, I'm a nurse, and by night, this is me. So when I first went off to college, back in 2012, I had my first depressive episode and was hospitalized and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And then I spent years trying to come to terms with it and accept it. And then I went through nursing school, and the stress of nursing school mixed with some other things pushed me into my first psychotic episode, where I believed that Lady Gaga was telling me through a song that I needed to kill myself, and I believed it and had a plan. And in the last minute, reached out and got the help I needed, and ultimately ended up getting a new diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, which is not as well known as bipolar disorder, but makes sense now. So yeah, it was a really wild part of my life, trying to figure out what was going on and just really losing touch with reality. But I really clung to humor during that time period. So.
And I can totally relate, Kendra. I mean, I've had, like I was saying to Amy, in my psychosis, my manic episodes have definitely had some very funny moments. And so I really appreciated your story and how you were able to just really get us laughing, even though it's a heavy topic. I mean, luckily, I mean, thank goodness you reached out to that friend, because we need you here. We need your humor. We need your story. So how have things been going for you, especially being in the medical field with COVID going on?
Yeah, so I actually work in geriatrics. I'm an Alzheimer's nurse. So the elderly population is like the most susceptible. Luckily, my building that I'm in has had 0 cases of COVID so far. We actually all just got tested recently. I was so glad that I still have my tonsils, so I didn't have to do it through the nose. But it's going okay. It's just kind of trying to be a new normal, and really, it's been kind of sad because we've kind of had to step in and be the family members to these people because they can't have visitors. So it's kind of a lot of filling my own cup so I can pour into theirs.
Yeah, definitely. That must be very overwhelming emotionally.
Yeah.
Making sure to have your self-care time is probably of the utmost importance right now.
Definitely.
I remember after you performed in the show, we talked after the show, and I was like, have you ever done comedy? Because that was was it one of your first times kind of being up on stage making people laugh?
It was my first time, and I've never done anything before. Actually, I didn't even go into This Is My Brave thinking that I would do the comedy. I did it as like a storytelling piece where I was just standing behind the podium, but I incorporated, funny aspects. I mean, it's Lady Gaga telling me something. I mean, it's kind of goofy. And then my producers were like, we want you to do this as a stand-up. And I was like, no. And they kind of gave me that push that I needed. And then I started practicing at home with a handheld mic because I was like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I still don't, as you can see. And but yeah, so it was a really cool experience. And since then, I've had some, you know, friends and family members that are like, you know, hey, you should do open mic nights and stuff. I haven't done it yet, but it is something I'm interested in.
You will get there. I have no doubt. I have no doubt. And I have to say too, along the lines of the, you know, the hallucinations of the celebrity aspect, I had that too. And when one of my hospitalization, my second one, I thought that Jessica Simpson was going to be meeting me at church on Christmas Day because it was way back in 2005, and her show with her ex-husband now, but Nick Lachey, that Newlyweds show, was super popular. I really think it's common for popular culture to kind of get into our brains when we lose touch with reality. I totally relate too on the stress level. Like I was under a lot of stress at work. So that's why I know we talk a lot about self-care, and, you know, there's people who think of it as just manicure, pedicures or whatever, but no, it's so much more than that. And really taking good care of yourself before things get, you know, your mental health deteriorates. So just staying on top of it really makes a difference.
Definitely.
All right, Kendra. Well, thank you for your intro. We're going to get everybody back in here, I think. So Katie is going to put us all back together. I had to turn the lights on because it was getting a little dark in here. Bear with us. Technical glitches. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Raj.
The Brady Bunch.
We're back. We're all together finally. This is the fun part. We get to all just chat about, you know, what it's like to use comedy in, you know, talking about mental health. In fact, so that's my first question is, you know, do you guys ever get criticism having, you know, been up there making people laugh about mental health? Do you ever face criticism, like folks saying, you can't laugh about that? That's not funny.
Depending on the venue, I've had, you know, feedback where maybe it's not, whether if I'm speaking at like a mental health organization, National Alliance of Mental Illness, or one of those, and you go into full on stand up, sometimes maybe it's not the place, or they take the exaggerations too literal.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Kendra, right?
So I don't really get criticism as much as I get like, wait, were you being serious? You know, because of the shock factor. And, you know, when you're a quote unquote high functioning person with mental illness, people just don't see that coming.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I've actually gotten a lot of good stuff out of it, where folks will ask when I talk about my therapy sessions. A lot of them just don't know what that first step is, how much it costs, or who to call. So I've been able to refer a bunch of people as a result of talking about stuff on stage to my therapist, or to a therapist. And that's usually the nice side. I'm in agreement with Amy in that sometimes there are folks that will either take a joke too literally, or it might just be hitting a little bit differently for them than the way I intended it to be, which is occupational hazard of comedy.
Right.
We actually had a little bit of that type of feedback at our 2018 New York City show. We had our producer, Amy Wasserman. Did you see that show on our YouTube? She handled it beautifully. Unfortunately, she was doing a bit on OCD and how she color coordinated her closet and was super organized. And obviously, I mean, she was making light of it, but OCD can be a very serious condition, and someone in the audience kind of called her out on it, but she handled it like a pro. And that individual, and her daughter ended up staying the entire show. And at the end, I said, "I'm so sorry. We never meant to, hurt anyone's feelings." And she said, and I said, "How did you like the show, the rest of the show?" Because they obviously stayed. She said, "We loved it." So, it's, you never know. You can't please everybody, but where do you get the most of your material? I think we know Amy gets a lot from home, but I don't know. Let's bounce that around. Like, how do you guys come up with what you're going to put into your act?
I live in America. It writes itself. That's most of it for me.
Yeah, mine's very autobiographical. So whatever's going on with me at the time is kind of like what I'm talking about. And having a psych nurse wife doesn't hurt for material at all.
Yes, I'm sure that makes it quite adventurous. How are you guys managing? I know we talked a little bit in the intros, but how has it been for your mental health? Raj was saying, like, just moving to New York, not getting the opportunity to really get out there with this comedy because of COVID hitting. How are you guys managing? I mean, it's been a whirlwind couple of months, but how's it going? Who wants to start?
I'll dive in because we talked about New York. Yeah, I think the part that hurts the most is how long it took to get here. You have to work. So I went, Arkansas for 5 years, Cleveland for a year and a half, and then finally get to New York, and everything gets shut down. So I feel for all the comics in this situation. For me, it's ironically been like the first month was just like I felt like a bit of a gimme because it just hadn't sunk in yet. But months 2 and 3 is definitely it was almost essential to be around family and be around friends and be around people that just kind of understand that I'm somebody that I need to do comedy almost. It's weird, but it's just it's a bit of a compulsion almost. So the ways that I think I've managed through it, one, the Headspace and or Calm apps are both available on Alexa or Google Home. So it's just like a practical tip that anybody can use. They're really good for checking in and calming down. Staying in touch with my therapist, she's been good about that. And then finally, I think really getting my exercise and nutrition in place. So my alcohol basically for 2-ish months really didn't drink at all. There was just no social activity, so I didn't feel the need to do it. But then I think also like having a committed gym schedule and maybe a good sleep schedule and a good diet, those things helped a lot.
I am right there with you with the meditation apps. I started building a meditation practice during COVID using Insight Timer, one of the other popular ones that has guided meditations. You can choose based on length, and it's just so easy to, when you're feeling that anxiety, I don't know for you guys, but it has amped up my anxiety at different moments. It's been ups and downs, and being able to turn on an app and just tune everything else out for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm not one who can meditate for like 20, 30 minutes, but 5, 10 really does make a difference. I would agree with you, Raj. Kendra?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you brought up Headspace. I've been using that since just before COVID. One of my best friends uses the app too, and we can kind of see like the last time she or I used the app. So sometimes when I'm starting to act a little wily, she'll be like, I see you have a Headspace. Maybe you should do that. And I'm like, you're right. So I've really been diving into that. And I also love how social media has gotten really it was getting kind of goofy after COVID started with like the COVID memes and like the, oh my gosh, we can't find toilet paper and just kind of everybody poking fun at that or making TikTok videos just to get other people to laugh, just to get through this. I thought that was really cool to see.
And you're doing our Brave the Storm run?
Yes.
Run, walk, jog, hike?
Yeah, I'll be walking.
Love it.
Yes.
and everyone else there's still time to sign up. It is this weekend. And so join us for that, raising awareness for mental health. But Amy, what's been the key for you during COVID, staying sane?
I think my robe, right? This is what I got into Tiger King right away at the beginning of COVID, and so now this is the uniform. I can, like, you guys all have been watching it, like this is normal. So I'm assuming that you've been watching my videos on Facebook, but you know, it's kind of been normal for us. Like my wife and I were essential employees, so we kind of like had to go out and work and stuff. But my wife got COVID for like 4 or 5 weeks, so it got a little scary around the house. But other than that, like I try to wake up with joy every day and fill my life with joy and try to be up there all the time. So I haven't really, I don't think, hit any real lows because my routine hasn't really changed. Like some people that have had to like quarantine or whatever. So it's been good.
What about guys? Any tips on, Amy, we might be getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know, but actually now it's better. Any tips on if someone out there is thinking of maybe preparing a comedy piece for a future This Is My Brave show, any tips for bringing their best foot forward for the show?
Speak from the
let the
heart.
smarter people in this room speak.
Raj, what'd you say? I missed it.
I said I was gonna let the smarter people go first.
It's funny. I was hoping you would take over being the funniest, Raj.
No, I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know if there's advice because everybody's got a different lean, a different style.
Yeah.
I would just say get the rhythm down. Like you probably don't want too long between jokes. I understand that I don't know, at least for the way I went about mine, I tried to keep the cadence about as even as I could. So that I had a joke every 90 seconds. It's not a usual stand-up set where you're trying to get a laugh every 10 to 15 seconds. If not more so. So I just think if you manage to pepper the jokes in, that's really important.
You're right, because I think that's the challenge in when you're a comedian on the This Is My Braves stage, on the Brave stage, you're telling your story while at the same time throwing in the comedy, and it's different than a traditional stand-up set, I would think. The joke, Raj, that we showed in your highlight clip about if so many of us were walking around with broken legs, we'd address the fact, are the curbs too high? I mean, it's true. In our society, so many of us are dealing with these mental health issues, and yet we shy away from talking about it. I think that's one thing we need to do more of, which you guys are doing a great job of. So what else, guys? Any resources? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I can't really speak for the whole comedian aspect because, like I said, nurse. But for me, taking the parts of my story that made me most nervous to talk about it and exploring those to be willing to talk about them on stage is what really helped me. For example, my psychiatrist and therapist were in the audience. And I, brought up the fact that when I was in the hospital, I was non-med compliant and spit my pills into Pepsi and learned that it floated. So that was something that I was like, I don't know if I should do that. There's going to be people there that might be mad at me or, but it turned out to be a pretty good, punchline and it was totally worth the risk. So I would just say explore those parts that make you nervous and give it a try.
I would agree. I mean, going back to the question about like negative feedback, I think to Kendra's point, like taking a risk, you can get the biggest reactions, right, guys?
Yeah. Yeah, that authenticity, right?
Exactly. What else do you guys think about this atmosphere we're in, not being able to get out and do live comedy? We're as an organization having to take our shows from the stage to a virtual setting for the fall. have you guys been able to explore? Well, so Amy, tell us more about your Facebook Live series. I haven't had a chance to check it out yet, but I will, I promise.
Oh, these are just random videos that I do for my wife, but nothing too crazy. But I've done now comedy on Zoom. Over the weekend, I had to do a pride show for Boston University, and I'm uncomfortable. But yet I think this is the way of the future. I think I need to get used to it because I think that this is how it's going to be for a while, or should be. I live close to New Hampshire, where everything is pretty much opened up and masks are optional. And honestly, you look, if you're wearing one, they look at you funny, right? There's a little, it's a little that. And so I worked in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, and I got a couple of more shows next month up in New Hampshire. So that'll be nice to be performing again. We're outside, the tables are all social distanced, but there was a struggle there because of going out and bringing people out. It's not really a necessity, but it kind of is. And my buddy that I performed at his club, and he wanted to open back up. He happens to be he happens to be African American, so you want to help support the Black-owned young small business that wants to keep his club going. But I don't necessarily think that we're ready to be out as a country either. So it's weird. There's a lot of emotions that have gone on with it recently, I think.
Yeah. Have you had the opportunity to do any virtual shows yet?
I think the question is if there have been virtual shows, and yeah, I've been on a couple. I actually put them together, and so the easiest way to find out about them, you have to text a keyword, the phone number, and that's pretty much it. And we had, I think on the first one we had 60 something people tune in, and with each opening, like each state phase opening, you definitely see the drop off, right? As people are allowed back out, the virtual stuff doesn't count as much. So it is an interesting period of time in this line of work, because you build out a virtual model and then it goes away, and now you're back into the physical world. And then if there's shutdowns after a second wave, what does that look like? So we are constantly in a state of flux, just like anybody else in a non-essential role where you can't really predict what your industry might look like. So yeah, I don't know. Amy, if you need a feature act up there in New Hampshire, give me a call, because I'm not doing anything.
I would love that. Yeah, now you're not far enough. You're close enough to come and stay in the spare bedroom for sure. Raj, what do you think about performing virtually? It's out of my comfort zone, and I'm struggling with it, but I need to embrace it, I think.
Yeah, I've never been an act out kind of person. So the style of comedy I have kind of just works because it's a little flatter. It's a little more deadpan. If you're a physical comedian of any kind, I can definitely see that being harder. But I think the other thing that it's forcing me to do is to actually look at my online model. So when you look at how people are scaling comedy and how they're ending up on networks or getting specials, a lot of it has to do with how big their following is. And these days that's online. So yeah, my actual SEO game, my advertising, all of that, I've been taking a pretty hard look at how I'm structuring things, because I've done comedy now for 6 years, and while the skill set is there, and it's a constant labor of love. You never stop becoming a better comedian. I think there was a sizable amount of work that I needed to do on the show business front that I hadn't done, that I'm finally getting around to doing. So that's the silver line for me.
Nice.
What about a writing routine? Do you guys try to stay regular with just every day sitting down and writing, or is it more kind of varied?
I wish I was disciplined. Like when I teach comedy, I'm like on their ass going, you need to be writing every day, and I want their pages at the end of the week. But for myself, I struggle with sitting down and being focused on it. I'll write bullet points in a note and then try it out on stage. And then I thought that's what I was going to do 2 weeks ago, was going to try out new bits, and I realized like how rusty I was, and like, in my mind, they sounded a lot funnier, but they weren't fleshed out. But that's what, Raj, as you can appreciate, that's what an open mic is for. That's what I'm trying to do, right? So
yeah. I think I got a little lucky in this regard because when I was down in Arkansas, I didn't mic a ton. There weren't a ton of mics when I first was down there, and so I was writing most of the time in an echo chamber, and I would test it about once a month at a live show. So
Nice.
I've gotten very used to just sort of hoping, and that's I think where the style evolves because it's when you practice, I don't think you're as physical or as loud as you when you're in front of an audience and you maybe need to push the joke a little bit. Yeah, I don't have a writing routine either. If a good idea comes up, I text it to myself. I've been trying to get better at one-liners, so I've deliberately pushed myself into the eighth level of hell that is Twitter because it limits my characters. So I have to force myself to be funny with fewer words.
Nice.
So that's turning into a bit of a scratch pad for me. So yeah, those are like the little things that I try to do to write. But I've also realized over time that my style of comedy or my at least my work ethic as a comedian has never been to just try to sit down and hammer it out. It just never comes out good for whatever reason. I try to do what I can to take care of my body and my mind, and then just hope that good things happen when I finally do get inspired by something.
That's awesome. Amy, have you been teaching many classes during COVID?
No, I haven't not for like 2 years now. The community college that I was teaching at a couple of semesters a year stopped the enrichment courses. So unfortunately I don't teach anymore, but I'll tutor like online if somebody, reaches out like or something.
I was going to say Kendra would be a great
Oh
student.
yeah, of course. Yeah,
That'd be
absolutely.
awesome.
Just getting started, wants to do more open mics once this COVID we get beyond it. But
Sure.
well, guys, this has been very inspiring because as we know, humor can help bring so much to the table and really help us with our healing. I would love to go around with one final question for each of you, and that would be, what is one piece of advice you have for those viewers out there in just finding humor in the journey?
Wow.
Loaded question. It could be a resource that you have. I know Raj already shared some meditation resources, but what's one thing that you want to leave our viewers with?
I'll throw one out. On top of the apps, if anyone is genuinely curious about a good therapist and needs a recommendation, I have one. And she's been very good virtually as well. And like is the kind of person that checks in even when you don't reach out. So I'll just get an email that says, "Hey, you doing good? Like if you need to connect, let me know." That kind of thing. So that's one way in which I'm happy to offer up I guess a resource for anybody that wants to connect directly with me. I'm happy to pass on those details. And then what was the other thing? A piece of advice?
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's just try to find one tiny moment of peace every day, and then try to stack as many of those as possible. I think for me, meditation has been useful in the sense that I'm able to check in with myself and catch anxiety before it spirals and becomes really bad, or just end up in a much worse mental state than I need to be. And I understand that these things are hard. So the resources that are apps that are having those apps on your Google Home or Alexa or whatever, or your phone, I think those things in conjunction with therapy or whatever people need to do, whatever those safeguards are, invest in them. And then invest in yourself in things that make you happy. I think one big change I've really made in terms of paradigm shift is I got very tired of being quote unquote productive. It's exhausting to think that because I have time, I need to be achieving more than ever. Because we're trapped at home, so we're turning our 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 sanctuaries into workplaces constantly. So that's why I walk so much. I got to get out of the house for a good 3 hours and just hit the streets and just walk and walk and walk until I'm tired. Whatever it looks like for you, invest in it and feel no shame if you don't feel like you are where you're supposed to be. because whatever that looks like today, that's exactly where you're supposed to be for now.
That's huge. And finding a good therapist is never easy. One of the things we're proud of is partnering with BetterHelp.com. And I use BetterHelp, so that's one of the reasons I was happy to endorse it as a resource. And they have an offer for us, for anyone out there who's looking for a therapist, 1 free month of therapy. Go to BetterHelp.com/thisismybrave to get that offer. And they take you through a questionnaire, match you up with a therapist that will fit your needs. And if you're not matched up correctly, then switch. I mean, therapy is like dating. You really have to hit it off with your therapist and feel good about the relationship. And, but yes, I would agree that finding a good therapist is part of the path to recovery and staying solid in recovery. Kendra, what would you say?
I would say if you're nervous about outwardly making jokes that are based upon mental health and mental illness, that I can guarantee there's going to be someone, if not more than one person, that can relate to what you're about to say. And they might need to hear that so they know it's okay to talk about it. It's really, you know, storytelling saves lives, telling jokes helps, you know, so it's just, you know, to quote Carrie Fisher, be afraid, but do it anyway. So
I love that quote.
Yeah.
She's one of my heroes.
Same.
Amy, what would you say?
I would say, you know, find joy in every part of the day and be grateful. You know, like that's my motivation, is I'm always grateful for something every day that I wake up, and find joy, and I try to fill my day with as much joy as possible, whether it's, you know, kisses from my dog or whatever. And I'm just trying to be silly, right? So this robe is how it got started with my wife when she was sick, and I was helpless. I didn't know how to fix it. The only thing I could do is make her laugh. So now that's getting part of the uniform. And I think, yeah, just be silly, right? Don't take anything too seriously, and find the joy in every day.
I love it. You guys are awesome. Amy, we're so glad that she's okay and has recovered. So glad you were able to keep her laughing through that illness.
Thank you.
That we all are struggling through. Thank you guys so much for sharing your stories again with us through BraveTV. This has been a whirlwind couple of weeks for us, launching it as a pilot, and we just so appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us today and share again and be with us. Stay tuned, guys, for season 1 officially launching of BraveTV on July 11th. So you'll be hearing more about that, but thank you guys again, and thank you for being part of our Brave family.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.